Oh, we have a phone call. Is that my heating engineer calling you? Damn. Okay, so just to reiterate what we just saw there, this is the write less and do more principle of JQuery. Whereas in the lab last week, we'd have had to write all of those extra elements, extra lines to append a click function to a lot of different elements. JQuery allows us to do that in a batch, in one fell swoop. So I want you to think about carefully how that could be used in conjunction with the this variable to make your color change code even more succinct and even more efficient. Think hard about that because that's going to be the content of your lab next week. Not the entire content of your lab, just a starter exercise. Right, what else can jQuery do? jQuery is also a neat little animator. You don't just have to use show, hide, and toggle. It can also do some smarter things with it. You can also fade elements in and out. So there are a number of ways you can do this. You can use fade in. Fade in without an argument will simply make the image fade in kind of slowly. I should have looked up the milliseconds, but I didn't. But it will make the image fade in slowly rather than just suddenly appearing. You can have more control over it. You can say that you want it to fade in for a certain number of milliseconds. If you give it a numeric argument, then jQuery will make that element fade in over that period of time. There is also the ability to make it fade in using some more, there are built-in words such as slow and fast you can use to make it fade slower and quicker if you don't have a specific milliseconds in mind, but you know you want it to be slower or faster than the standard. And what's more, you can give it a second argument, and that second argument will tell jQuery that you want it to only fade in to a certain opacity. So this opacity is set between 0 and 1. 0 meaning you can't see it at all, it's completely transparent. 1 meaning it has full opacity and the image loads as you would expect it to, and it looks normal. We can discuss why we might actually use that opacity thing now. So have I moved on? Yes, so this is now index 3. Index 3, there's a bit of change to the web page itself in that we now have 3 dog images on the web page, and there is now a button to deal with the dogs. That sounds scary. A button to make the dog images show or hide. This is a bit more like what you would actually be doing on a web page. So let's have a look at what it does. Again, when we load the page, instantly it hides the image. Here, do you see what I've done? By using just the tag image, it's hiding every single image on the page because jQuery is wonderful and makes things easy like that. We've still got the click function that toggles the dogs on and off. Let's just remind ourselves of how that looks without any fading in it. So, boop, there. I click on that and then I get 3 dogs now, which is lovely, and I'm very happy about that. Let's look at some of these fading options, though. So, I'll just comment that out. Oh, hang on, no, sorry. Yeah. So here we're using some of the standard fade-ins and fade-tos. So here you can see the first one will just fade in. The second one will fade in, but it will fade in slowly. Because I've used fade to, it means I can change the opacity of how that image appears. So I've decided to make it fade to just a half opacity. And the last one I've used fade in with that millisecond control that I talked about in the slide. So let's see what that looks like when I refresh this. So the first one will fade in normally, the second one will fade in slowly and only to a half opacity, and the third one will fade in over the course of 4 seconds. So when I click, oh, no it won't. There we go. So you can see how slow 4 seconds is. Right, so that's good that you can have this control. It's good that we can do the 4-second control. Why might we want to be able to control the opacity of things? Well, you'll notice that it is... Oh, yeah, sorry, yeah, go for it.
I was going to say, sometimes you might want, if you want to see something in more detail, you might want to hover it for a nice effect where if you hover over it, it goes to full opacity.
Exactly, yes, that's brilliant. So you'll notice that the second one, whereas the other 2 used fade in, the second one uses fade to, and that's because fade to controls not only things fading up to a certain opacity, but you can also fade things down to a certain opacity. Now, this is a design pattern that you might not be aware of that you know, but you do know it. And the fact is, if you see a slightly faded image like that, has some connotations. It has connotations of this is not available, or it has connotations of this is not the one you've selected. If we had this the other way around and the two images either side were faded half and the middle one was completely opaque, then that middle one would look like the selected one. So it might be good if you have like an image gallery, or if you have something that you need to, just a set of images that you need to navigate in some way. It might be a nice thing to consider if you're fading between them, to think about using this a fade to and changing the opacity of things, because it really does tell your user a lot without you having to explicitly say, you have selected this one, you have selected this one. It gives the user, it hints to the user what's actually happening. So fade to can be actually quite useful in that way. Okay, so we've done that. It's not only fading that you can animate with, you can also do sliding. So this works in a similar way. I've used slide toggle here because, again, toggle will just mean that it slides in and out, or you can also tell it to, hang on, sorry, I just want to double check and see if I've got a slide on sliding. I do have a slide on sliding. I'm not going to make this. Okay, so there are 3 different things you can do if you want to make something slide. You can either slide it up, which means it will appear on the page. You can slide it down, which means it disappears on the page. I want to clarify that because I thought sliding up and sliding down was just the direction in which it slides, but it isn't. Sliding up means it appears, sliding down means it disappears. And then toggle obviously just means you can make it slide in or out. So if we just have a look at how that works. Boop. Oh, that was naff. So again, the first one slid. Oh, that's terrible. The first 2 slid normally. The second one slid slower than the other, and the other one slid even slower. Now, I've done this on purpose because you need to be aware that these animations are not just changing how that image looks. They're not just saying, here is the box that the image exists in, I'm going to slide it up and slide it down into that box. It's actually changing the space that image takes up on the screen, right? That is why when this first image slides down, it doesn't just slide down and stay like waiting at the bottom there. It slides down and then its presence on the page is completely lost, right? So that's why everything kind of shunts up in that way. So I want you to be aware of that when you're dealing with animations. If you're dealing with slides like that, be aware that that image is still there. They're all still there technically in the DOM, but they are not present in the geometry of the page. And that's something you will need to consider when you're laying elements out, okay? I want you to be aware of that. Okay, so we have sliding done. Now, this is another aspect of jQuery which is pretty useful. So there is something in jQuery called callbacks. Callbacks are a way of you telling JavaScript to just hold off, just wait a moment before you do something. Because sometimes, particularly with these animations, they can be set off, right? And JavaScript will say, right, that animation is complete. As far as I'm concerned, I've set it off. Even if that animation takes 4 seconds, JavaScript will forget that has just happened. It will say, yes, we've started the animation, on to the next thing. That can sometimes be very annoying. If you have a series of actions that you want to occur in a function, and one of them is an animation, for example, and you want a function to occur after an animation has happened, JavaScript will fire that second function as soon as it's fired the animation one, regardless of how long the animation takes. In that situation, you might need to use a callback. And a callback is something you can append to certain functions. I encourage you to look at the jQuery API if you're intrigued about using this. And it means only do this second function once this previous function has finished executing. And the way that you do that is you provide the function as a second argument to that previous function. Let's actually have a look at how that works now. So here, what I want to do... Oh, no, that's not the one I want to get rid of. Sorry. So in this situation, I want the first dog picture to hide slowly when I click on the Show Dogs button. And I also want the alert to come up that says it has been hidden. Okay, let's see what actually happens when I do that. Oh, hang on. If I'm hiding it, I need it to actually show to begin with, don't I? Okay. Yeah, okay, right. So all of the dogs are there. This button is going to hide that first dog, and then it's going to show an alert that says that dog has been hidden, just in case you didn't know. When I click on it, right, I expected that to be hiding in a slow animation. Oh, it's disappeared instantly, right? Now that's really annoying that it's done that. What we can do is, if we use a callback, which is what I've done in this situation, what it will do is it will wait for the animation of it hiding to have finished before it does this alert. So you can see the way that that works is that here it says it has the selector dog1, it has the action hide, and it's taking the argument of slow, but then it's taking the second argument, which is an entire function. And this is the callback function, and this means this alert will only fire once the hide has happened. So let's have a look at how that works. So here, there, right, do you see how that was different? It actually did the entire animation, hid the dog, and then it showed the alert. So that is the power of a callback function. If you're in a situation where you have two different actions that you want to take, and the second one is just trouncing all over and stomping all over the first one, and the first one doesn't get its chance to shine, then you need to use a callback function. And that's quite a powerful thing that JQuery can do for you. Okay. What have we got next? Okay, yes, this is another thing I wanted to just point out quickly. I'm not going to show you an example of this because it's pretty straightforward, but jQuery allows you to do chaining. Chaining is where you give it multiple different methods and functions to do, all in the same row. If I was in a situation where I wanted this particular element to both fade in and also I wanted to change its color, the color of the text, to red, I could say tada.fadein and then on a new line do tada.css color red. Or I could just chain all of these arguments together. So you are able to do this just by adding a dot and adding all of the different things that you want to happen to that element in a row. It just makes it a bit neater and it reduces the number of lines that you have to write. You don't need to continually select that element. If you're going to do multiple things to that element, you can just chain all of the things you want to do together. Yeah. What happens first? I believe that's a good question. I don't know the answer. My understanding is that they all happen at the same time, so they're all applied at the same time. Yeah, I can't see any reason why that would mean they're applied tiny milliseconds after one another, but if that's going to matter to you, look it up. Yeah?
Can you get like an object that you can get information about like events that are happening? So like say I have like a list of items that are like unique, and I want to know when maybe a couple of events have happened to a couple of items. Is there any way to find out which? So say I have like a list of items, and I want to say if this item is clicked, but I don't want to have like classes for each of them. Is there a way I can say if this element, if an element's been clicked and it's a power bar?
Mm-hmm. No, I think, let me try and reiterate your question. So your question is there a way that you can have, that you can apply an event listener to multiple different, for example, list items, and not have to give each of those list items a ID that says, or a specific thing? Yeah, so that is a brilliant example of when you would use the jQuery's ability to batch add a function. So you would just do list item and then dot click, for example. And then you would use this. So that is the power of this in this particular situation, because the variable this becomes whichever one of those items it is that has fired. So you don't need to think about. Can you remember how we used used this in the change color example?
Say you have like large example, because obviously if you have like maybe 10 items in the list,
Yeah, no, I suspect maybe you and I need to talk about this afterwards, but I think it would still work regardless of the number of list items you had. This will take the value of whichever list item it was that was clicked, whichever list item it was that was hovered over, whichever list item it was that was any of those events. This would take that event. It scales. It doesn't. You don't need to worry about it being too big. Maybe you can show me an example after the lecture and we can talk about it in more detail. Okay, so that was jQuery chaining. So just know that exists. That is also going to be useful for you in your lab, because there is no jQuery command that allows you to simply change a class. Okay, you can only add classes, so you might need to look at what you can do with classes and how you might use chaining to get there. I'm not going to say too much more, but you can have a go at trying to solve that one in the lab, and we can look at the solution together afterwards. Okay, so just a quick note, some of the common manipulations that you were doing in JavaScript, getting inner HTML, if you want to do it in jQuery, you do it by just doing .text. There is also another option in jQuery, which is .html. What that will give you is any text and HTML that is within that element. So, for example, if you had a element that said, should I do it on the board? No. If you had an element that was a div, and you selected it, and you said, what is the .text of the inside of this div? It would print out all of the text that was in there. If you said, what is the HTML inside of this div? It would print out all of that text and any of the HTML tags that were in there as well. So if you had a span in there, it would print that out. So that's the difference between .text and .html if you ever need to use those. We saw that you got the value from your form. In jQuery, it's just .val. And getting an attribute in jQuery is just .attr. Okay, yes, so let's look at playing with classes. It allows you to do many of the same class manipulations as you were doing in JavaScript. So adding a class is just doing .add class. You are also able to remove classes. Removing a class, it can take an argument, and the argument, if it takes it, is I will remove any of the classes that you list inside of these parentheses. However, if you leave those parentheses blank, it will just delete every single class from that element. And you can also, as I showed you before, toggle classes on and off. I think this slide is going to be very important for the lab. So just to highlight that. You asked, can we edit CSS directly using jQuery? Yes, we can. And what I like about it is that it uses CSS terminology. So do you remember when we were doing background color changing? Yes, what was your question? Sorry.
Is jQuery more secure than JavaScript?
Secure? What do you mean by secure?
Because I know JavaScript has a lot of flaws in security when it comes to user safety and stuff.
What type of security flaws are you thinking about? What, that it can be edited by a user?
In secondary school, there was Mapsway. Not Mapsway, sorry, some website called Maps which runs on JavaScript. All I had to do was copy and paste the code and it would do one.
Right, yeah. So because that's the case with any client-side script. I don't believe it has any. I don't believe there's any reason to think that it would be less editable because it's a client-side script. Yeah. But yes, that is me not believing something, not knowing something. So by all means, have a look, and if you find out something different, let us know on the forum. Good question. Right, yes. So you can use jQuery to edit CSS, and it is less confusing, I think, than doing it in JavaScript. Whereas JavaScript, when we were changing the background color of an element, we had to do .style, and we had to write background color with a lowercase b and an uppercase c, and it was all one word because that's how JavaScript recognized it. jQuery says, no, okay, I'm not going to redefine how you get to these properties. We're just going to use plain old CSS properties. So to change something with to change a CSS attribute with jQuery, you do this. You do .css, and then you put in the first argument the actual CSS attribute you want to change. The CSS property you want to change. I'll change that in the slides. And then you change the value of it. So if you wanted to change the background color, no longer do you have to remember how JavaScript says it. All you do is, in quotation marks, write exactly what you would write in the CSS. So in CSS, to change background color, you do background-color. And then you write the value you want it to take. So jQuery just makes that sort of thing a bit more easy. Do I have an example of that? I don't need to show you this example. You trust me that this works. That's how you would change the background color of this element. Hang on, I'll show you it quickly. So this example changes the background color of an element when you click on the button. Boom. What a horrible looking web page I've created. So you can see again how you can change CSS in the HTML file in response to user input. So I'm going to briefly introduce you to the concept of Ajax. This is not something that you will desperately need in your final assessment, but I just want you to have an idea and recognize the name Ajax if it ever comes up again. So Ajax stands for asynchronous JavaScript and XML. That's slightly, it's not a misnomer, but you don't need to use XML. You can use other objects like JSON, JavaScript objects notation, which is what we're going to be looking at next week. And what it means is it allows you to get resources from a server and display them on your page. Now, the reason this is interesting is because it allows you to do things asynchronously. Asynchronously means that you don't need to wait for something else to have finished or have happened. I say that because JavaScript is a single-threaded language. JavaScript will just pootle through one after the other and do things one after the other, which is fine normally, but there are sometimes situations in where you would want JavaScript to be working on something else whilst it's still going through the rest of the code. And to do that, you can do asynchronous calls with Ajax, and this means that you can use JQuery to do some Ajax calls. One of the abilities you have when you can do asynchronous calls like this is you're able to get things and get resources from the server without having to reload a page. That's what you're doing. Every time you load a page, you're saying, hey, server, give me some more information. Give me some more HTML. Give me some more CSS, whatever. But you can actually do that. You can get more information from the server asynchronously without having to load a page by doing this particular example of a JQuery function. So let's have a look at this particular JQuery function. It's called load, and it's pretty simplistic, actually. So this is the slide about it. You can actually load text from the server and show it to the user without having to have them load a new page, and it's done with the load function. Now I'm going to show you the load function here. It's so simplistic. So all I have here is when a button is clicked, it's going to fill the element placeholder, which we see here is a div. It's going to fill that with whatever it loads from the server that's within resources.external text. Let me show you what external text contains. There you are. It just contains this external text. Now, this is going to seem like a bit of a toy example, but it might be useful for you if you end up saving information that the user has entered into a text file, or if you get a text file from somewhere else. This will allow you to load it in. Now, I would show you this in brackets. However, because this is dealing with a server request, we can't do it in brackets, because brackets is a local instantiation of your website. We need to look at the version online. So I've uploaded this to Igor. Have I? Yes, I've uploaded this to Igor. I'll just show you that in brackets this won't work. I bet it will work now that I did this. In brackets, because this is a local version and load requires a Ajax, a call to the server, it's not doing anything because there is no server in this example. Whereas when we do it online, so you can see here we're actually up in my Igor space. When we click on it, boom. So now it's loaded this text from this external file, which is quite an interesting, quite a powerful thing to be able to do that with a client-side language that you're able to go to the server and asynchronously request resources like that. As I said, this is quite a toy example, but you might find ways of using that make your page a lot more dynamic. Okay, yes, we're done with that. Now I want to look at some pre-built widgets. Now, jQuery, as well as being good at manipulating the DOM and making things more efficient and doing animations and doing callbacks, it also has some really neat pre-built user interface elements. I'm going to show you a couple of these that I have used, and then we're going to navigate and look on the actual web page because there's a lot more there than I'm going to show you in this class. So, jQuery user interface. It's a specific jQuery library. It's not included in the standard release of jQuery, so you need to include another link to the jQuery UI library if you want to get these things to work. Of all sorts of pre-made widgets and various useful interactions that you might want to use on your page. So, for example, I'm going to show you the accordion system for showing and hiding information. Now, this, all it does is it's just created a wrapper for some clever hide and show functions, and it's just made it very short and allows you to not have to write a load of text. Let's see how it works. So, here I'm going to show you this is an entirely new page. We're not talking about dogs anymore. I'm sorry about that. So here we have, I've got a load of information that I want to show the user, right? And let me show you, the user, what this information is. This information is a lot of stuff about Latin that I want everyone to know. I want you to know about this. I want you to know about this stuff about Latin, this stuff about Latin, and it's all sectioned off. This is a really good candidate for using that show and hide function pretty neatly. So we were showing and hiding images, but this is a good way. Remember what I was saying about you might want to display a lot of information on the page, but the user might not want to see all of that information at the same time. And as a good designer, you will think, okay, well, maybe I don't want to overwhelm the user with all of this knowledge, all of this information. This looks a bit massive. I know, for example, maybe that some of my users only ever want to come and see section 3, so this is kind of annoying for them to have to scroll through all of this text. This is a really great candidate for an accordion. Now, jQuery UI, you can see here that I've added a new link here. So this is the, no, I don't need to look that up. This is the link to the actual jQuery standard library. This is the link to the jQuery UI library. If you're going to use UI elements, you need to include this link. And all I've done is I'm just saying that load of data that I had there, which is all inside of a div with the ID of accordion, I'm just going to call the accordion method on it. That's all I've done. Let's see how that affects the page. Now we have this accordion. That means that I can click on things. Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah, that is impressive. It's just doing some clever. Do you see what I'm saying? All it's doing is using those show and hides that we saw before. But if we were to code this ourselves, we would have to code a load of lines for it. jQuery has gone, okay, this is quite a common thing that people are going to be doing. We understand and we appreciate that. Here, we've made something called an accordion. So there you go, you just had this neat thing, and all you had to do was call the accordion method on that div. There are certain things that you require, so you need to ensure that you follow this, this pattern of having it all inside of a div, having H3 elements, having divs. You can see here that each section title, it needs to have a section title for you to be able to click on. Okay? And so you need to follow a few kind of rules about how it should be laid out. But apart from that, the accordion just works by doing that. There's something else that I've randomly added on the bottom of my page, which makes no sense. So I've put the menu at the bottom of my page, which is a bad decision. But this is another example of a jQuery UI widget that I want to tell you about. So here, my menu system is branching. Okay, my menu system has a lot of different subcategories and sub-menus, and these are all of the places that people can get to in my shop that sells everything. My shop sells everything. And so you're able to now navigate through this. I don't want the user to be able to see every single thing. If users are coming to my shop and all they care about is music, they don't want to know that I have home entertainment and car hi-fi and utilities. They don't want to know any of that information. Luckily, jQuery has realized that this is a common design problem that people are going to have. So you can see that my menu just looks like this. It's just an unordered list, right? We've used unordered lists to make menus before. So all I need to do is take the object on my page, which is called, it has the ID of menu, and I just call the menu method on it. This method again is coming straight from that UI library. And now you can see that that menu has just kind of shortened itself back to the first level of information. And what happens now is when I hover over anything that has extra information, boom, it shares that second tier of information. Both of these examples are about understanding what information your user wants to know and not overwhelming your user with too many options or too much text. Okay, they're both about kind of knowing that and creating sub-menus and sub-menus and making sure that the right information is hidden and shown at the right time. That's an important thing for you to do as a designer, is understand that even though you have all of this information to give to your user, they might not want all of it at once, and you might need to think about how you display it to people. So those are two interesting examples of the jQuery user interface. Now, you don't need to be nice to me. I know that this looks ugly and terrible and isn't very easy to understand. There are no hints to the user right now that they can even click on these things, right? They just look like H1s. There's no information that the user can take visually that they're able to click on these things. jQuery UI has thought about that as well. So this is what the jQuery UI web page looks like. And there's a lot of interesting information up here, but one thing I want to point out is this section called themes. I find this page quite poorly laid out, but that's just me. And this here is a thing that allows you to choose the theme of that jQuery UI widget that you've created. How do you want it to look? So I could have my accordion looking like this. I don't like that blue colour. I want it to be red. Oh, okay, that's interesting. That looks even worse. Maybe I need a designer to tell me what I could use. Oh, I like this kind of dark theme. That's pretty nice. I like that. So what you can do is you can then take that theme and download it. There are a lot of options you're going to have in there. I'm just leaving them all selected, and I'll tell you why in a moment. So I've downloaded that theme. Oh. Right, let me find the CS here. Okay, I'm going to copy that into the jQuery example. Okay, so it's now in there with my other style. We've got this one called jQuery-US CSS. So let's add that to our page. So you know you can have multiple different styles on a page. And this one is called jQuery UI.css. Now let's see what the page looks like. Please be different. Magical. Okay, now the user knows what they can click on. And this looks a bit nicer as well. Now things are starting to arrange themselves a bit more neatly. Now, that is all very, very useful. However, I just want to issue a little warning here. The fact that you can use that jQuery theming, if you were to do this on your large coursework, for example, the fact that you were able to use that jQuery theming would be great. You would get maybe a small mark for showing that you know that there is a theme out there. But what you would get more marks for is editing those themes yourself and showing that you understand them. And how you show them that you understand them is by commenting it and saying this is what this section does, this changes this to this. And also ensuring that there is no excess code in your CSS, ensuring that you've trimmed the fat from it. So I downloaded everything there, but that was dumb. I didn't need everything to control those elements. What you need to show if you're going to use this type of theming is that you have trimmed the excess and you aren't using, there's no CSS in there that isn't being used. And also that you've added your own comments to the CSS that explain how that particular orange style is added only when an accordion element is clickable but hasn't been clicked. Okay, so you can use that theme because that's sensible, it's there. You don't need to write it yourself. However, you do need to, if you want to get the marks for it, you do need to show to us that you understand how it works and what it does. So just a word of warning, if you want to use it but you still want to get a lot of marks for it, make sure that you've proven to us that you understand exactly what that CSS that you downloaded does. Okay, so just a couple of other interesting UI, jQuery UI features that I think you might find useful. I'm just going to navigate the page directly. One of them is tabs. So a tab system, again, this is another way of showing the user just enough information and not more than they need. Again, this is just a clever wrapper for a load of hide and show functions that otherwise would have taken you a long time to write. There are lots of other examples here. You can just change it. I'm now just mousing over, I'm not clicking. Anything you like the look of, you can come on this jQuery website and look at the source, and the source will show you exactly how these work. So let's look at the default functionality. All that's happening here, sorry, can you see that source or is it too small? Is that okay? Yeah? All that's happening here is we've done the same thing as before in that we've understood what structure is required for this query to work. You're not just going to be able to throw this UI widget onto any underlying structure. You have to follow what's required. And what's required is A, an unordered list of titles, and then B, these divs with the ID of tabs 1, tabs 2, tabs 3. And then all you need to do is enclose all of that in a div. You can see this div has the ID of tabs. And again, all we've done is selected that ID and called the tabs method on it. That tabs method, not from the jQuery library itself, but from the jQuery UI library. And then we get this magic. And then if you want it to work just on mouse over, let's see how they do that. Oh yeah, now it's just changed it. It said only work with event mouse over. That's all that's changed. Let me see what else I wanted to highlight to you. Okay, we'll do modals first. Has anyone heard of a modal before? Yeah, a few of you. Modals are very trendy right now. You'll have seen those before. A modal is just a box that appears. It's a box that appears on the web page, but it isn't a pop-up box. Okay, but it looks really nice. Modals are often used when you see thumbnails of images and you want to see more details about it. The way that many web designers give you more details now is they make this thing called a modal pop-up. So here we go. This modal here, it's genuinely just a little box in front of the screen. jQuery calls them dialog boxes. That's just because they're not being trendy. And you get a lot of you can either ask the user to press OK or cancel or delete. You can take actions as a result of a modal as well as a result of an interaction. Yes.
Sorry, I don't really get why she is it. Is it just a box?
It's just a box. It isn't a pop-up box. It's not a pop-up box, and it's not a new window. It's a box that overlays the information of the web page. You can see that I now no longer can hang on. If I cancel it, I can highlight all of this. Oh, but with the box up, I can't use it anymore. I'm surprised they don't have an example here of an image. Let me just look up image modal. Okay, they'll be doing this in Bootstraps. There we go. Oh, look, it's a modal. That's a very common way of using it. It's just a new box that isn't a pop-up window and isn't an alert and just kind of gives you a bit more detail about something. So that's why you might want to use it. Now, the final thing that I want to highlight from here, as you can see, there is a lot, and these are just certain ones. If you go to the API documentation, you'll find that there are just loads and loads more things that the jQuery UI can help you with. This one I really wanted to show you because I personally think this would make a really interesting interaction on a website, a really interesting way of highlighting and bringing new information to a user. And I would... Okay, no, I'm not going to... Okay, I probably shouldn't say any more than that. But the jQuery UI... Oh, sorry, yeah, what was your question?
Is jQuery UI compatible?
Good question. I believe it is, but there is also jQuery Mobile, which is another library as well, which gives you even better compatibility and stability when using mobile. Anyway, the thing I wanted to show you is this idea of something being droppable. So it allows you, jQuery UI, to move elements around. So here, this is just a div. And I can leave this div anywhere I want to on the page. But there is this function called droppable, which means another div can know when a draggable object, which is what this is, has been dropped onto it. Boop, there, now it's changed. Let's just have a quick look at how that source works. So here they're just two divs. That's all they are, is a div. And one is called draggable, one is called droppable. And in this function, it's called the method draggable on the object called draggable and called the method droppable on the object called droppable. And you can see that when a draggable object is dropped onto a droppable surface, that a function can be fired. And I think that's a really interesting opportunity for creating a nice way of navigating and interacting with a website. Imagine that you wanted to inspect something more and you had to pick it up and drop it onto something, and then that caused new information to appear or something like that. I mean, I just think I really like this. I think it's very cool. There are other things you can control about it. So when this object is not dropped, it will go back to its place. When this object is dropped, it won't go back to its place. This thing highlights to show you where you can drop it. There's a load of different things you can change with this, and we're not going to investigate it now. But just know that this exists. I think it's exciting and interesting. Right, we're nearly done. So a couple of jQuery tips. These are just things that you can do shorthand that you might want to do, or you might see in examples and don't understand what it is, but they're quite common. So when you're selecting an element from a page, if you do $ in brackets, the ID or the class, then it's going to go to the DOM and it's going to look through it all. I found it until it finds it. If you're going to use that element loads of times, you don't want your jQuery to have to keep going back through and going, found it, because it already knows where it is. So if you are doing that, then you can set an element on the page to be a variable. So you see here, in this example, SumDiv. I've got a div that's called SumDiv. It has the ID of SumDiv. If I'm going to use it loads and loads of times, I can set it to a variable. That variable name can be anything, but you might as well call it the same, the same thing. And in that situation, you can just use the words SumDiv without that bracketing system, and you can refer to that div. You can refer to that element without having to make jQuery traverse the DOM every single time. That might make things a bit quicker. So know that you can make elements. You can create variables which relate to elements. Another point is that you don't have to actually write the words $document.ready to start your to encase all of your jQuery. There is a shorthand to do it. You can just write $ and then just do an anonymous function and then have that contain all of the things that you want to do. So if you can start using that. I mean, it's not going to save you that much time, so you don't have to. But just know that that is shorthand for this document.ready, so that if you see any other jQuery and it doesn't have this document.ready, you're like, how does it know? How is it working? And you see this is a shorthand. This might be what it's using instead. Okay, so these are some of the links that you will find useful. As ever, W3 Schools has a fantastic tutorial on jQuery. If there's something that I've gone through that you don't understand, go to W3 Schools. It will be there, and then just play around with all of those examples they have. The jQuery website, specifically the API, I haven't shown you everything jQuery has done. I've just shown you some examples of things it can do. If you're wondering to yourself, I wonder how I would do so-and-so, go to this website and find out if you can do it. The UI website, obviously, that has loads of demos, loads of examples of how things work. And this is just a CDN for jQuery. You can find any other ones that you might want to use. Does anyone have any questions at this point? Yes?
So if we use jQuery completely, will that cancel our JavaScript grade? Or
Yeah. No. Yeah, that's a good question. So the question is, if we only use jQuery and there is no JavaScript on our page, does that mean that we haven't used JavaScript? No. If you use jQuery in your final assessment, then that's fine. That will count towards your JavaScript grade. And successful use of jQuery will also give you a few extra marks for using a library as well. So yeah, use jQuery if you want to. Can you ask the question regarding Bootstrap on the forum so we can give a detailed answer to it? Would that be okay? Can you ask that? Okay, hang on. Guys, wait, just be a bit more polite. I think I saw another question somewhere else. Did you have a question? No, you didn't? Does anyone else have any more questions? No. Okay, right. Well, thank you for your attention, as ever, guys. Thank you.